Everyone, it's Justine and I'm here to give you another watercolor tutorial for a card that I made for Suzy stamps that I'm also entering into the Pretty Pink Posh watercolor blog hop, so I'll link to that in the description below so you can go check it out. There's lots of prizes that are available. To get started on this card, I'm using Phineas the Peacock stamp from Suzy Stamps, and I am inking that up with Versamark ink. And I am going to be stamping this onto a piece of Tim Holtz watercolor cardstock. For whatever reason, my stamp just was not sticking. I think I had some wet ink on there. When I pushed it down, it was all fine. And then I just stamped that to sort of off-center, off to the right side, and I made sure that the whole peacock was in there except for the right side of the swirls. Next, I'm going to cover that with some Ranger Superfine embossing powder and get that baby embossed. I gave that a zap with my heat gun here. I'm just going to turn it on fast mode so you don't have to sit here and watch my embossing melt and die of boredom. And so I decided that I would put you in fast mode there. I'm just going to go ahead and heat emboss that until it's all shiny and pretty. And then we're going to move on to the next step of the card. I taped down my watercolor cardstock with some washi tape so that it wouldn't warp as much, and I saturated the paper with water and a large brush. I got my actual first watercolor brushes not too long ago, and I find they make a really great difference than using just a standard paintbrush, so I'm happy that I invested in these. They weren't very expensive. I think they were $20 or something like that for a set of 3 or 4, and that ended up being a good investment. Using Distress inks, Salty Ocean, Mermaid Lagoon, Tumbled Glass, and Broken China, and I'm just going to be blending these to create sort of a watercolor background that almost looks like water actually when it's all finished, and I really like the way that it turned out. So it's now time for the watercolor process. I'm starting off with my base by starting out with Tumbled Glass, followed by Salty Ocean, and then followed that with Broken China, and then with Mermaid Lagoon. And I'm just kind of going in, and I just want to make sure that the colors are blending into each other and they don't just look like a mishmash of blues. So I'm just taking my brush back and forth and getting as much of those colors blended into the other to create sort of an ombre look. Then I grabbed my dry baby wipe and kind of patted it off there. It gives it a nice texture to the look as well. And then I went back in and tried to smooth over those colors as much as I could. Now, to do this, you just keep adding more water if you find too dark of spots, and then if it's too light, then you just add some more ink to your craft mat. And I just keep blotting away certain areas and making sure that the Phineas the Peacock here isn't getting stuck with too much watercolor sitting on top of them. I always glue in between each step, or not glue, heat between each step so that I can work with a fresh area and that all of them are dry so they don't smudge as much into each other when I started to put the texture of the wavy lines in there. I think this is creating a really pretty background, and I just keep going in with a darker color over a lighter color so that it really stands out, and then again heating it with my craft heater and then going back in and adding more and more. Alright, so it's getting towards the end here where I'm really starting to like it, and just going to give it one final little dry and go over my peacock here with a Versamark pen. I'm just going to re-emboss that area because I noticed some of the ink did dry on top, or else some of the embossing powder faded away. I'm not sure which one that is. So when I go back in, you'll see here that it was no problem. I just had to go back in and redo that. And then I stamped the To Be Creative Means to Be in Love with Life. This is a Love Life stamp set from Suzy Stamps. I stamped that in Versamark ink. Make sure your background is dry at this point, because if it's not dry, you're going to get embossing powder and a big mess all over it. And I just used that Ranger Superfine white embossing powder again. It's important to use the same white embossing powder for both of them because you don't want them to be a different tone of white or a different shade. And I'm just going in with my heat gun here and melting that embossing powder just like I did with Phineas the Peacock there over off to the side. If you're interested in any of these products that I have on my video today, I'll have direct links to all the stores in the description as well as on my blog, and more details on my blog if you're interested in finding out more information on this card. I'm now able to remove the tape and trim down my card there. As you can see, some of the masking tape didn't hold up against the watercolor, which was fine. I wasn't expecting it to anyway. And I cut this card down to about 3.5 by 5 inches. And I wanted to create a panel on the middle of my card. I wanted to layer it on white, and so I cut it down a little bit smaller than I normally would a card front. I wanted to make sure all my edges were straight, so I just added one little piece off of that there. And I wanted to put this on a white panel, so I used some Tombow Mono liquid adhesive. It's really important to use a strong adhesive at this point because your watercolor paper is a bit warped at this point, and you don't want your card base to warp as well, so you want to make sure that it has some stability and that you push really hard and that it glues down exactly flat like you need it to be. Now the last step is just adding it to my card base. I'm using a top folding card that measures 8.5 by 5.5 inches. It's 110-pound Unisolar white cardstock. I scored that 4¼ inches and folded it so that it's a top folding horizontal card. And then I just glued my panel onto the front of the card and needed to just add some embellishments at the end in order to complete it. Alright, so now that my card's glued down, I just wanted to add some double-click Skittles embellishments. I'm using some mini glue dots to attach these, and I'm using my tweezers to get a hold of the rocks here, and ended up giving up on the tweezer idea and just putting them down with my fingers. I'm using the Peacock double-click Skittle colors from Suzy Stamps, and I really love these to add just a little pop of an embellishment that's super inexpensive on your card, and it makes it look really, really pretty. And I added that in a group of 3. So I hope you enjoyed this card tutorial today and that you'll check out the blog hop and check out Suzy's blog. And thank you so much for watching. Please click subscribe and thumbs up my video and leave a comment if you're interested. Thanks so much for watching.